Back in February, EA Sports announced that any college athlete at an FBS program that wanted to be included in College Football 25 would be compensated with $600 and a free copy of the game on the console of their choosing. While most kids in college would jump at the chance for anything free, there was a ton of speculation from those on the outside that given the nature of some young adults to be forgetful, or the schedule of the college athlete is so tight that they would either not fill out their documentation on time or forget altogether and not get the information they needed to do so. But much to the surprise of the fans, the amount of takers on that offer was more than EA had even anticipated, as the limitations on roster spots was that of only 85 scholarship athletes. But yet, there was one glaring omission from the list of over 12,000 plus students to sign. Arch Manning is the only player of note to deny his involvement in the upcoming game, stating that he was more focused on performing on the field versus in the video game. While those words never actually came from his mouth, only his camp's. But I'm of the belief that he actually has signed a separate deal to be involved in the game that we just don't know about yet. But I'm saving those thoughts for another video. But nonetheless, EA has come out and stated that we will not be able to create opted out players in this game, which I'm sure that will be fairly easy for them to do, as they already have inappropriate name filtering in some of their other titles. But I think that's actually created more questions for me than answers, some of which I want to explore with you all today. So how I want to start off this video is talking about how far will we be able to push the likeness barrier for opted out players. Now, with my very base level knowledge of how coding works, I can honestly say there will likely be some sort of checksum filter with a list of names that the game will not allow you to input on that specific player. But my biggest question about it is, will you be able to use that name at all? Now, I know that Arch isn't a very common name, and I'm just using him as an example because he's the only one that we know of so far that has opted out. But are we gonna be prevented from using that name in general? And will it be restricted to just the first name or the last name? Or is it gonna keep us from being able to use those two names in combination with one another? Like I was saying, I don't think Arch is a very common name, but I even have relatives with the last name of Manning, and I hope that they don't restrict us from being able to use the name itself at all. Like, will that even impact the generated names for recruiting classes? Like, will we never see a player come in with the last name of Manning? And I think I would actually have a problem with that. Granted, outside of me just bringing this up, I don't think it was ever something that I was going to be looking for. But now that I've posed that question, it will be on my mind every time I have a new recruiting class come in. And the thing I'm probably the most curious about this is, will we even be able to edit the placeholder player? Now, don't get me wrong, I probably wasn't going to go that far because I really could care less if we had real players in the game, which more on that later in the video. But I know there will be some people out there that would want to change the name to something even similar to Arch's name. I heard one YouTuber say Starch Lanning, which I really wish I knew who that was just so I can give him credit for that. I thought it was funny, but at the same time, it's not important to me. But will there be restrictions on similar names? Like maybe not naming him Arch, but naming him Archie, like his grandfather. Are they going to filter us from being able to do that? But the editing of the player could be huge because I'm just thinking of it from their number standpoint. What if I start a dynasty with this program and that player is given a number that I want to use for someone else? Will I be able to change the number of the default player to something that I want it to be? Or will we not be able to touch these default guys at all? Now, I know EA came out and said that the default generated player for the opted out person would be given an overall of what that school traditionally has had on an average for the last decade. But how average are they talking with that? Are they going to go so far as the average height of that position, the average weight of that position? I know the overall was there, but did they mean other aspects of that character? Maybe skin color, things like that. I just really hope that they don't restrict us being able to make the person that we want in place of the player that opted out of the game. And now I want to address something that I haven't really seen many people talking about, and that's the fact of, will we see more players opting out in the future? And I can actually make the argument both ways on this one. Now, I could say yes, because some players' egos will prevent them from accepting a standard group deal because they feel like they deserve a bigger piece of the pie. And let's be honest with ourselves. As teenagers, we were all full of it. We were all full of ourselves, and we all had some sense of entitlement, and some more than others. But there will absolutely be guys that are going to want more money than just the $600 and the free copy of the game that they're giving out. And speaking of being full of themselves, some guys are also going to opt out because when they see what their rating is in the first iteration of this game, they may think, oh, what? I can't believe EA rated me as a 75. I know I should at least be a 96. We see guys in the NFL do this over Madden, and guys in the NBA do this over 2K now. Now, you'll still have those guys that overperform their rating that they were initially given in this first launch, and some that'll perform to the point to where EA would want to involve them in a bigger cut of the game like they have with the cover athletes. But generally speaking, I do think it is a possibility that we see guys opt out after they see what their ratings are. But I heard Matt Brown say this in his On3 interview. Of course, there's going to be guys that are upset with their rating. That's the beauty of it. That's all part of the fun, is getting that ratings release and reacting to what those ratings are. Now, this is why I don't think that we'll see more guys opting out. Now, we haven't had this game it'll be 11 years when the new release comes out. Now, I have nephews and friends with kids that weren't old enough to enjoy this game when we still got the earlier NCAA releases, like 12, 13, and 14. But they themselves are in high school now or entering college for the first time. So they really don't understand the impact of what this game meant for us college football fans. And now we have these future generations of high school athletes and future college recruits that are going to be able to get used to having an annual release college football game that they're going to want to be included in and play as themselves. I remember when I was a youngin', like that was the first thing I wanted to do anytime I popped in a new Madden or a new college game, even NBA Live and 2K back in the day too, was I would create myself and play as myself in these games. So for this younger generation coming up, they're going to have that opportunity to not have to create themselves, but to actually be a part of it. And I think that's going to go a long way in ensuring that these kids want to be a part of this. And also, peer pressure and FOMO is real. And when other guys on their team are opting in and being included in the game, they don't want to be the oddball left out. So they're going to opt in as well. Now, you should never sign a contract or an agreement to do something just because your friends are doing it. But when you're doing something like this and giving the opportunity for younger fans that may like you as a player to be able to play as you in the game and have you on their team and build your career up, is honestly a boost to your brand and your brand recognition. But ultimately, I believe it's the answer to the question of will we see more guys opting out in the future is no, because they're going to see this as a legacy cementing moment in being able to be immortalized in a video game. There are current pros right now that make millions that say they would have done it for free or a free copy of the game if it were still around back when they were playing college ball, because this game meant more to us as a community of not only gamers but fans of the sport than a dollar amount that you could put on. And now I want to address the question that actually hit me when the whole litigation between EA and One Team Partners popped up over the summer of last year. And that is, did we need real players to begin with? And while we're at it, do we really need real coaches in the game? So it came out in the report back in February that the likeness of coaches would not be featured in this year's version of the game. But there's hope for that to be worked out for future iterations of it. But let's start with the players. Now, as for me, I consider myself a diehard fan of this game, in this series altogether. So whether or not the game featured the likeness of real college athletes, I was going to buy the game anyway. It did not matter. I'm used to having to wait weeks for someone to upload a roster with accurate players on their teams before even starting my dynasty. But I think that was more so because of where the game was at back then versus where I find myself now. Just downloading fictional rosters to start a dynasty because I don't want to see any of the current players. Because when I start a dynasty, I'm starting out as one of the lower level universities anyway. So all that's really doing for me is seeing some of the more established guys win the awards for the first 3 years in my dynasties. But the more casual fan of college football is who I think EA is trying to capture from a sales perspective. Because like I mentioned earlier, those kids who weren't used to playing the old NCAA football games, or someone in general who just wasn't used to playing NCAA football games but maybe only plays Madden. These are going to be first time buyers of this franchise. So for them to fire up a game and maybe knowing only the guys on the team that they follow or the team that they like, that may be a huge turnoff for them to not see the starting quarterback, running back, for them to not have the recognition that they would associate to that university, might cause some negative emotions about this title and prevent them from buying it in the future or even returning the copy that they just purchased. So yeah, I think the casual fan who wants to try out this game for the first time would be upset or annoyed that there weren't any players, especially given what NIL looks like today. So no, I don't think we needed real players, but I think EA needs real players in order for the first iteration of this game to be as successful as they want it to be. Now, coaches, however, I do have a different perspective on that one. I would much rather the game had came out with real coaches versus real players. Now, let me explain. A star athlete at a school would stay realistically 3 years and when they become draft eligible, if they decide to go ahead and go that route, 4 years max, right? They're going to exhaust their eligibility and then move on to the next level. At a most 4 years, and obviously in extreme circumstances because of injury and things like that, you'll see 5 and 6 year guys, but that's more of the outlier and not the standard. So you're seeing that turnaround a lot faster. But coaches, however, when a coach is successful, they get rewarded with contract extensions. And those contract extensions see those coaches staying at those schools for much, much longer than what you would the typical athlete. And in my current line of work now, when I get to have that nice conversation of college football with someone who is a fan of the sport, but maybe doesn't know everybody on their school's roster, they absolutely know who the coach is, and they have either positive or negative things to say about that coach. The impact of the athlete is felt only for a short amount of time, but the impact of an iconic coach can be felt for decades. And one of my favorite aspects of Dynasty Mode is the coaching carousel. Seeing the names that I know and recognize change jobs and go to universities and schools that I would have never thought to see them do in the past. But obviously living in this video game world, we get to see those things. And it gives me the opportunity to go as my created coach and be the offensive coordinator for a Lincoln Riley, a Ryan Day, a Nick Saban when he was still around. The guys that have created the roster for NCAA Revamped had done an amazing job over the years maintaining all of the accurate coaches that we had in college football. But I can also make the argument that we shouldn't have real coaches in the game for one huge reason, and that's cost. The amount of money that you would have to pay some of these coaches to be in the game might actually surpass the total amount that they had to pay out for the athletes. I know some of your more famed head coaches and even some of your more popular offensive coordinators would command a pretty penny to be featured in something like this. So in that sense, I would see adding real coaches as a waste of useful resources. In doing the math, I think they said that the amount of money that would be paid to the players would be a pool of a little bit over $6 million. And I don't know what you would have to pay the coaches to be able to be included in something like this, but let's just say it was the same amount. You were using that exact same dollar amount that you were paying out to the players, and you match that for the coaching side of things. I would much rather those resources go toward the development of deeper features in the game that a lot of us diehards want and crave in this series. Do you know how far an extra $6 million could go in a video game budget that was only spent on the development of the game and not on contracts paid to other people? They could actually make the wish list of everyone that's made one come true. Now, I think what would be way more important is pushing the limits of customization that we would have for the default coaches in the game. Give us way more options for cyber faces, way more options for clothing and apparel. But I think the freedom of customization will go a long way in comparison to paying for coach likenesses. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. But I would really love to know what the community sentiment of needing the likeness of real people is, and your thoughts on guys opting out, and will we see more opt-outs in the future? So please leave those thoughts down in the comment section below. And if you enjoy this type of content and would like to see more of it in the future, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't have to miss a thing. Stay blessed, y'all. I'm out of here.